we are going to maximize revenue today. Something that I think all of us, whether it's any type of visitor experience, attraction, need. I think we all realize that, people staying at home, and Sabine has mentioned so many times, is we're competing against Netflix and the couch, getting people into our attractions. We've got to maximize what we make out of them. So today, Jonathan Zuckerman from Attraction Retail Partners, sorry. He's the founder and I think CEO of that, since you've been running that for so long. I know Jonathan's been involved in a heap of things in retail and tourism space. So he's got loads of experience, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more about all things attractions and maximizing revenue. And I think specifically talking to ticketing and pricing, which again is something that South Africans, we need to start adopting. We can't be sitting back forever. And obviously you may recognize Sabine. Sabine is going to be joining us more as a speaker today than with her AAVEA hat on. Sabine, as you know, is got a wealth of experience with her business Curiositas, and pricing vitally important in her space. So I think, Sabine, ladies first, do you want to say hi and just explain your side of what your role is today? Oh, I got you muted again, sorry.
There we go. Hi, Marianda, nice to see you were able to join us. And for the old and the new faces, yes, you usually see me here as chair of the African Association of Visitor Experiences and Attractions. I'm now actually speaking to you with my own personal hat on, Curiositas. And as you know, I focus on all things attractions and all things futures thinking in the leisure space. And that's really what got me to where we are today, which is smart pricing, which is really when I track how attractions and how tourism, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with the presentation, is how they are changing and growing with the visitors as to how they are pricing their experiences. I thought to myself, we need to look at what's coming down the line, and we need to be future-proof our attractions. As we all know, up to 50% or minimum of 50% on average for attractions is in fact the income that we make from the door, and therefore getting your gate free right, your door free right is the most important part of your business, because that's such a huge part of your income. So I teamed up with Jonathan Zuckerman, and Jonathan can tell you a bit more about himself, and we did some research and we came up with what we believe is the best offering when it comes to smart pricing.
Thanks, Sabine. Also, as Johnny said, we've got a business called Attraction Retail Partners. And it was actually at last year's AAVEA conference, which I think was a virtual conference. There was a German chocolate museum that presented a case study about their business and the effect that smart pricing had on their business. And been attending AAVEA conferences for a while, and I've never seen so many questions after a presentation before. So following that conference, we went on a search for a solution for this market, for our market. I previously have worked with EasyJet in the UK in the revenue reporting department. So smart pricing is something which has always fascinated me, and the ability to sort of, smooth the yield and maximize revenue, given the constraints of given capacity constraints and what have you. But we'll get into the details later. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's how we got to where we are today. And yeah, nice to meet everybody, and looking forward to updating everyone and answering questions afterwards.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, again, really excited that you guys could be part of it today, and thanks for taking the time. Also good to hear that you remember last year's AAVEA conference. Thank you. Good shout out. We'll do that again soon. So next time, I'm sure we're going to make an in-person event of it. So Jonathan, you've got a really cool presentation you want to share with us and walk us through. Can I pass straight over to you when we get going?
Right. So let's talk the history of revenue management. There we go. So haggling in bazaars has been something that has been for the times and the ages, right? I mean, a fixed price is not something that we tend to see in bazaars. And in fact, in many stores, and I've actually just, can you believe it, spent 10 days in the Congo, and there were no prices anyway. You haggled, and the seller kind of figured out in his head what his best price was, and the buyer decided whether they were willing to pay that price. So it was the price, the actual price tag was only introduced, and I found this really interesting, in 1870. And this came about when retailers, on the one hand, had perhaps more and more offerings within their shop, so they couldn't keep tabs of what each item, they weren't just selling rolls, they were selling rolls and candles and perhaps a bit of biltong on the side. And equally, they might have had more outlets. So it wasn't just Pop's Bakery, it was Pop and Son ×4 Bakery, and you had to keep tab of all your prices. And that's when the price tag was actually introduced. And that really set the way people, certainly in first world economies, looked at pricing for many, many years, until in the 1980s, the airlines reintroduced the idea of prices that were not necessarily fixed. It wasn't one price. It depended on the time of day, on the amount of demand, on the how many seats were left to sell. So they reintroduced smart pricing or dynamic pricing. And from then onwards, of course, it was taken up by a number of businesses in all sorts of spheres, but specifically in, let's call it the leisure industry. You've seen it in airlines, you've seen it in car hire, hotels, of course, and even, for example, Uber. I mean, everybody's very used to the fact that, you know, 5 minutes after your friend might be calling an Uber after you, it's absolutely not necessarily the same price that you're paying. So what is the current status of revenue management? The current status is really, we can move to the next slide, that some attractions are using static pricing. A lot of the value chain in tourism is using dynamic pricing. As I say, airlines, car hire, hotel rooms, Ubers. You can click, I think there's going to be some wording that comes up. There you go. And the reality is that there are a lot of visitor attractions, and we'll look at some case studies that are using dynamic pricing, or as I like to call it, smart pricing. In the space of 4 years, it's taken off phenomenally quickly. Some people dipped their toe in it, and now it's really taken off in a wide range of visitor attractions. The other reality is that many attractions already use a wide range of techniques to spread demand. There was one client we looked at, and they had I think it was over 200 ticket types. Now, you might, when you think of your own attraction, think that can't be possible, but just think of adult, child, pensioner, that's 3. Then think of, you know, early or late. Then think of free tickets. Then think of a weekend ticket or a school holiday special. So your number of specials very quickly add up. And what we found is that a lot of attractions are using specials, Valentine's Day specials, evening specials, that sort of thing, to kind of make up for the fact that prices are static. In other words, it's the same entry fee at Gold Reef City, whether you come on a Tuesday morning or a Saturday morning, when clearly the Saturday morning is so different. So clearly attractions are looking for techniques to spread the demand across different price points. And so the future, really, what we've noticed is dynamic pricing. As I say, it's just a matter of, the future is already here, which is a common saying in futures. It's just not evenly distributed. So very much so, we've seen dynamic pricing take off incredibly successfully at a number of attractions. And as I say, certainly for the rest of the tourism value chain, it's completely the norm. But it's certainly not evenly distributed in South Africa, and it's being adopted really, really quickly because people are seeing attractions are seeing enormous benefits in smart pricing. Jonathan.
So revenue, I mean, the concept we're talking about, which is prices going up and down with supply and demand, is also known as dynamic pricing, yield management, demand pricing, time-based pricing, plan ahead pricing, and the term that we like to use is smart pricing. Sorry, I'm just going to go forward here. So if you think about your average attraction or experience, the top line of your income statement is revenue, the revenue line, and revenue is very simply quantity times price. You increase the quantity and you keep the price the same, your revenue goes up. You increase the price, you keep your quantity the same, the revenue goes up. and you can play with your quantity and your price, and the product of those two is your revenue. At the same time, every attraction receives visitors, and for who are buying tickets. For some visitors, time is more important. Maybe overseas tourists who've got very limited time in an area. For other visitors, the ticket price is more important. Maybe locals who are prepared to wait for an off-peak time to go, and they're prepared, to rather save a bit of money and pay a lower ticket price. So the question we're asking everyone is, how do you drive quantity and price and thereby maximize and drive your revenue? Are you driving it actively or passively? Are you using tech and data, or are you just using gut feel? Are you doing it proactively or reactively? How often do you change your prices? Are they a function of last year's budget? Are they a random thumb suck based on what we think the market can bear or what other people are charging? How do we actually determine our ticket prices? How often do we change them? Do we change them once a year and then not worry about it for a year? Do we change them as supply and demand changes? And if so, how often do we change them? How long does it take us to respond to changing market conditions? And is our strategy and implementation appropriate in the year? We've got 2021 yet. Should be 2022. So is it appropriate in the year 2022 with all the tech that's available, with all the other industries that are pricing dynamically, pricing smartly? How should we be pricing in our industry? All right, so interestingly, Disney said that their pricing strategy is aimed at staggering attendance for better guest experience. So the advantage of varying your price based on supply and demand is that if you think about that red curve over there, the red curve is your supply demand curve for any given attraction. And if you've only got one price, you're only going to capture a little bit of the revenue under the supply demand curve that is appropriate for that price. If you're prepared to move up and down the price curve as supply and demand varies, you'll capture more revenue under the curve. So what we are proposing is that attractions and experiences move their price points up and down the supply and demand curve using the latest technology in order to maximize the revenue under the supply and demand curve, and then spend the time instead of focusing on what price should we do, and should we discount, and should we give locals at this price and pensioners that price. We let systems take care of the price, and we focus on moving our curve up and to the right, to actually improving the overall demand for our attraction, whether it's by improving the experience or improving our marketing. And the more we do that, and the more we focus on that and let the price take care of itself, the more money we'll all make. All right, so the benefits are hopefully becoming quite clear at this stage. Number one is everybody has a fixed capacity. You can only fit so many people in at one time. And by using this technology, one can smooth the price across various different times and make your experience and your attraction more efficient. Adjusting prices in real time takes into account real-time changes in demand, weather, peak hours, seasonality, and whatever other supply-demand factors there are that are affecting your attraction at that point in time. One of the common questions we've been asked is about democratization of price points. And I think airlines are just the best example of this, because if you look at airlines where they really do and have for 40 years been allowing prices to float up and down, or no one can say that there's usually a price, above a certain fixed cost which airlines have to cover for fuel and what have you. There's a price point for everyone, and for people for whom price is the most important thing, they'll book in advance and find on an off-peak time and find a price point that suits their pocket. By not implementing smart pricing and by implementing arbitrary fixed pricing, we've had this discussion with a few clients, we actually are being anti-democratic. We're having the reverse effect. So for example, if you're a museum and you've got a fixed price, and let's say maybe you've got 1 or 2 free days in a week or a month or whatever it is, what you're saying is anybody who can't come at that time cannot access that attraction at a price below your arbitrary fixed price at a time that they can come. And maybe that's a democratic price point, and maybe it's not a democratic price point. But the bottom line is that by allowing the price to move along the supply-demand curve, one democratizes one's attraction, appeals to locals and internationals, or people for whom price is more important and people for whom time is more important. All right, Sabine, you want to take over with some case studies?
Yeah, we thought we'd look at some case studies because it doesn't really make sense unless you see it. Actually, if you don't mind talking to this one, because I know this is one you looked at quite closely, Jonathan.
Sure. So this is a Dutch art museum, and what they were trying to do, their main goal here was to smooth their capacity during the day. They were very quiet in the mornings and quiet towards the close, but the middle of the day saw a peak that actually got them into trouble in terms of capacity planning. So what they started doing was pre-selling tickets and varying the price according to the time of day that people entered. And if you look at the light blue line, it shows how they improved their attendance in the early mornings and the late afternoons, less of an effect obviously towards the end of the day. And that's basically flattened the curve. We all know what flattening the curve means, but they basically flattened their curve.
Yeah, so if we could just stay on this slide. I've been doing research for a client on over 100 attractions. It's an overseas client, and they were also looking at pricing. And what I found so interesting is that a lot of the attractions I've been looking at have said that whilst, of course, the capacity constraints with COVID have meant that you couldn't have the full number of people in your attraction, what they did find is that visitors were very happy with things not being so crowded, not from a health and safety point of view, but just from an experience point of view. So there were no queues, you could easily get your coffee, etc., etc. And so many of them have said post the deep lockdowns that were in place, they're using smart pricing to spread that curve, because for many museums, they are very quiet at the beginning and at the end of the day. And what they want to do is spread out that curve so that you don't have to build more toilets, you don't have to, you're never running a coffee queue, etc. So smart pricing can both be used for maximizing your revenue and spreading the demand, and therefore smoothing out the experience and making the experience a better experience for everyone, which, as Jonathan alluded to, is something that Disney was very clear they wanted to do. Next slide. So I thought, let's look at some examples. The Florida Aquarium has used smart pricing for a couple of years now. I thought it very clever. They call it plan ahead pricing. And their little slogan is that you will always pay more at the door, and you will always pay more as the time goes on. So in other words, the sooner you book, that's the cheapest price. If I buy my ticket today, what is today, Monday? Tomorrow, it'll definitely be more expensive, even if it's just R1 or 2. I think what's quite important for people to have a look, because we possibly sometimes think that the price variances are really, really large. Now, this is a little bit small. If you look at this one for June 2022, first of all, you can at a glance see what the adult general admission price is, right? And you can see on the 3rd of June, it's, oh, my eyes are bad here. What does it say? $12.20. Whereas on the 7th or 31, what? I can't actually.
$22.20 on the 3rd of June.
Okay, and on the 17th?
$22.95 on the 4th. The 17th is $31.95. The 18th is $33.70.
Okay, so we're talking about less than $1 difference, which is 10 Rand. But as you can imagine, this aquarium actually gets a lot of visitors a day. I think between 5,000 and 10,000 visitors a day. So 10 Rand makes a big difference. And then, of course, the price difference might be even larger on what we call high holidays. So, deep in your school holidays between Christmas and New Year, etc. But this was also just a start for people to start understanding that, look, the prices are different every single day, even though There might be not a huge difference at the start when you first start using smart pricing, but they call it plan ahead pricing, and they're saying it's never going to be cheaper than buying online at this moment for these days. So as you look closer, this price will only go up. So it incentivizes people to buy ahead. And of course, that's important in terms of, we've spoken about this before, in terms of preserving pocket power, preserving their decision to come and ensuring that they spend more money on site on the day because they've actually pre-bought the tickets. The next case study I want to show you is the Indianapolis Zoo. They started smart pricing way back in 2014. Their little slogan was pick your day, pick your price, pick your package, because they actually offer smart pricing as part of a package, including zoo parking and drinks, etc., like that. And they again also say their slogan is also very much, if you book in advance, the price will never be cheaper than on the day that you're currently booking. The results after year one were quite phenomenal. They found improved visitor satisfaction in terms of capacity on site. They saw an increase of revenue by 33%. And importantly for them, because this was one of the targets that they wanted to reach, they saw what they termed a meaningful attendance to shift from peak to off-peak. So they saw a 20% growth in attendance and at the same time, a 70% reduction in overcrowded days. So they saw more people coming, but less overcrowding because you were able to spread them out over the day. And I really like the way they presented their smart pricing. You can quickly see at a glance which days are the more expensive days, the red ones, which days are the less expensive days, and which days are in between. And then you can quickly decide which ones you're going to go for. And of course, those prices will change every single day. That price gets more expensive. So the earlier you book for your school holidays in December, the cheaper it's going to be. Disneyland has also recently completely gone into smart pricing. Next slide. And they've called it, they've put it into 6, let's call it pricing buckets, which they call the magic key. So they have 6 different types of days, with tier number 6 being the most in-demand days. And this replaced their annual pass, which they no longer offer. They also introduced it after the 1 year of closure to COVID. And this is something that I think is also quite opportune for our attractions at the moment. People are very used to quite dramatic changes in how parks are run, what things are being offered, and what the rules of engagement for your leisure experience are. So I sort of feel that the next couple of months is a really good time to institute anything new, whether it's new queuing methods, new ticketing methods, whatever at your park, at your attraction, because people are pretty used to things not being the same as they were 2 years ago. So what did Disneyland found? They found that the per capita spending increased by 40%. And that they increased the average income per ticket, right? So again, if you look at their, I actually found their website quite complicated, but nevertheless, this is how they presented it. You can see on the 13th of May, an entry ticket is $149 US. On the 18th of June, it's $164. So that's quite a significant difference, $30. And then within that, there are 6 different tiers. And those tiers relate to the time of day that you're coming. So clearly, if you come first thing in the morning, it costs you more than if you come the last 2 hours of the day. So you kind of choose your day that puts you, 13th of May is going to be a cheaper day overall. You click into that, and then there's 6 different tiers or time slots that you can choose. I then also looked at some cableway studies, which I know, we've got a few cableways here, but again, they are visitor attractions, and they are deeply dependent on capacity, because you can imagine the entire system is a bottleneck, much like Robben Island and its boats. The system is a bottleneck from start to finish, and you need to maximize that revenue just like in an aeroplane. So this study looked at 64 ski resorts. What I found interesting is that there was a phenomenal growth in the take-up of smart pricing. So in 2016, one resort was using smart pricing, and just 3 years later, almost 30% of resorts were using smart pricing, with a further 30% saying they were planning to go that route, they just hadn't implemented it yet. Their consumer research found that 60% of their users thought this was a very fair way to price. And I found this quite interesting because ski resorts in Europe have a big issue with locals who live in the village or who live in the region versus people flying in to ski on the weekends or to have week-long skiing holidays. And it was found that those who have a strong mix between locals and international visitors tended to adopt smart pricing first, because it was a way of actually democratizing the price. And those same people, those locals, felt that it was a very fair way to price. I also thought it interesting, they looked at these number of ski resorts you can see in the table below. I was surprised at how few tickets were sold online in advance. You can see on average, that's in German there, vorher means beforehand, 1%, 2%, 0%, 5%. After the first year of dynamic pricing, which is the second column, it went up to 25 and up to 33%. And then after the second year of dynamic pricing, the growth still increased. So this to me was also very interesting, that it shifted demand online and that people found that fair.
Right, a little bit about how we can help now. So Sabine and I are very lucky. We've got a US, we have the rights to a US solution called Event Dynamic. In a nutshell, what we're looking for is we're looking for the latest tech, AI-driven, which was not part of which was not a ticketing company trying to sell you a ticketing solution with pricing as an add-on. All that Event Dynamic does is price tickets, and it's what we call agnostic. We don't mind who the ticketing company is, so we don't compete with ticketing companies at all. So how we would work with potential clients with an attraction or an experience is we do an initial investigation of your data to see if there is an opportunity to improve your revenue.
Speak a bit slower, Jonathan.
So how we'd work is we do an initial investigation of your data and see if there is an opportunity to improve your revenue. And if so, what is that opportunity? If we feel there is an opportunity, then we would provide our tech risk-free with no upfront cost, win-win only. And in fact, it's not written here, but also no long-term contract. So if we do agree to work with an attraction or an experience, we basically only take a small part of the upside, and there's no risk and no long-term contract. So we have to pay for ourselves every day. A few things to just bear in mind is that we're not talking about airline seats, Cape Town, Joburg, economy class, where in that case, it's a pretty commoditized product, and a large part of the price is what are other people charging. In this case, every business is different. All supply and demand factors are different for every, for each attraction. There could be, and so therefore every integration is different, and every AI stands for artificial intelligence, it's machine learning. Every machine learning model is different. Some people have got a big membership database or a big membership customer base. Some want to offer differential prices to locals. There might be different drivers from weather to room numbers to gate fees to history to sentiment. But what is really important to know is that history is only so much of demand, and the supply and the supply demand curve is changing all the time, and systems and prices need to adapt to that, because we can only predict, if no one can predict the future with 100% accuracy. And then the way we would implement is we generally implement in what's called a crawl, walk, run fashion. So we don't let the machine go full Terminator mode on day one. We would typically allow the system to be constrained. Maybe we want to limit the number of the amount that prices can vary by, how often they vary. Maybe you want to introduce fixed tiers like a discount for locals or a discount for members. Maybe you want to say prices can only ever go up. So we'll work with our clients and adapt and constrain the machine. The machine will always work out the perfect price in the background, but constrain that to whichever business rules you're comfortable with. And there are contact details for anyone who'd like to get a hold of us.
So again, just to be clear, because I think, sorry, Johnny, I know some people have approached me and we're a bit confused. This is not a ticketing system. So this doesn't replace web tickets, Quicket, CompuTicket, Ticketmaster, your own system that you've built. This is a pricing method, and this algorithm will feed the price into the ticketing system. And so, it's an addition to, the system is an addition to that works out the perfect price. What I often say to clients as well, and I know from experience from running a number of attractions, is that we all set our prices. I don't know, in the two attractions I was working in, our financial year ran June to July. And so you would set your price in March, you'd have your budget meeting, you'd discuss it with the board. You would then go through a board meeting, get it approved. And from 1 July, the prices would change and be valid for a full year. Now, that's a full 18 months out. It's crazy. And how did we decide on those prices? We decided on CPI, we decided on demand, we decided on what other people are charging, whereas the AI will let you know what the market can bear, which in many cases could be a whole lot more than what you thought. Or if you charged maybe 10 or 15 Rand less, maybe you'd get 20% more people, which in fact would give you more revenue. So that's the quick summary. But anyway, Johnny, let's see if there's any questions or thoughts.
Thanks, Sabine. I think there's going to be loads of questions, but luckily as the host, I get to ask the questions first. But one thing I wanted to just point out, obviously, Jonathan, thank you for leaving your contact details up on here. On the AAVEA website, you can actually get these again. If you don't get them now, they're on there. And I really would recommend, often these info sessions are brilliant, but it's better to actually sit down with a face-to-face, take your data and say, this is what we can do for you. So if anybody is looking to touch base, I would give them a call, chat to Jonathan and Sabine and say, look, this is where we are. Maybe come and sit with us and walk us through it. But a couple of things I picked up. I love the democratic pricing. I think that's really cool, very applicable for South Africa. And I think, so often people will say this ticket was too much or was too little, and dynamic pricing just or smart pricing makes so much sense. And I guess this is more of a statement than a question, but why aren't we doing it? What is our barrier in South Africa? Why are we sitting back? Are we waiting for someone else to do it? Is there someone in South Africa that's doing it already that we can say, cool, they did it first?
Well, I think South African attractions are relatively slow to adopt new ideas and technology, not just smart pricing, but other things. We do have a client that signed a contract, but we can't quite say who that is yet because I haven't seen the contract in my inbox, but I checked with him this morning and it is signed, but I don't feel I can say who it is yet, which will be great. It'll present a fantastic case study. And on the democratization of price, I often say this, like, what is a price that's actually democratic? I mean, is 50 Rand a price that everyone can afford? We all know there are many people who can't afford 50 Rand. Equally, when I was at the Cableway, which is now more than 5 years ago, I remember people often saying to me that they found the price really expensive. When I then asked people, what is the price? Something like 90% didn't get the price right. Most people overestimated the price. And that was always fascinating to me. So they would say, it's really expensive, we can't go up. Well, how much is it? How much is a ticket? And most people couldn't get it right. But Jonathan, you always quote the good example of the Jonathan Zuckerman, that is, because they're using this in stadia and for football and for the fans, which you can imagine is an even more complicated issue to manage. Do you want to just chat about that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, so in stadium sports, overseas, the adoption of smart pricing is increasing exponentially. It's gone from nothing to now English Premier League teams are adopting it. And if we're worried about we always say, like, if one is worried about democratizing pricing and what's the market going to say in the tourism or attraction industry, it's 100. That problem is 100 times more serious in the sports, in stadium sports, where, for example, Liverpool Man United, that ticket, what price could that ticket bear? It could definitely bear, with all the people that come from overseas for that game, it could bear a lot more than the local fans would be prepared to pay. But those stadiums still protect the local fans and have smart pricing Now they've got a mechanism within their business rules where they'll protect the local fans and still kind of maximize the hospitality suites for the, or whatever it is. So yeah, but I mean, just in terms of just to carry on with what Sabine said, by not allowing the prices to move, it is actually, in fact, imposing some perception that we have in our heads, or last year's budget plus CPI or something arbitrary like that on the market. And we don't really have a feel for what is a democratic price. We're not allowing it to move up and down along the demand curve. So yeah, it's kind of the way we're doing it right now is kind of the opposite of we would certainly argue would be the opposite.
Yeah, we sort of put ourselves in a box and we say that's what we do.
We think 100 rand is a fair price, right? But what happens to the person who wants to come in the last 2 hours of the day and would pay 30 rand, and that's all they can afford? We're not giving them that opportunity.
Jonathan, what would you say, advice to an attractions leader or a manager? I say to you, look, I run Butterfly World in Cape Town, and I have a ticket price, but every Wednesday it's it's 50% off after 4 o'clock for that hour. That's me ticking my box. I'm democratic. I've allowed everybody an opportunity. I can then say to everybody, look, I've got dynamic pricing. What is it? Is it the same thing, or am I just kind of trying to?
No, so I would say, firstly, I'd say to the person who's running Butterfly World, I'd say every day you're not putting in smart pricing, you're costing yourself like 30% minimum of your revenue. So that's the first thing I'd say. I'd say that offering like weird specials on weird days or weird times is just it's you giving yourself a pat on the back for doing something for the local market or whatever it is, without actually like asking the market to actually tell you what they want. And the only way to do that is to actually just take the data in and then spit out a fair price. And you can do it within your business constraints. We spoke to one attraction who was very worried about democratization. We said, you can still offer, we worked out pensioners, a big thing. So you can still offer like a fixed price for pensioners. It's implementing smart pricing doesn't have to be an all or nothing kind of approach. So yeah, that's what I say to Butterfly World, sorry.
And I also think the argument would be you spend a lot of money advertising those specials. So we've had some marketing managers sort of think, oh, what are we going to do if we're not marketing a special? So first of all, if you're spending 200,000 Rand on marketing your special, that's the first amount of tickets you've got to make back. But as we showed, your job as a marketing manager becomes actually marketing the attraction and increasing the demand for that attraction overall. People then go into the website or come on site and say, right, I'm prepared to pay X price or Y price. We need to be quite clear that it's very rare that dynamic pricing or smart pricing is completely free to roam in its completeness. So it'll never go completely to zero or to 20 million Rand because Christmas Day is so popular. You put in guardrails. So you say, look, it costs us a minimum to open the front door. It costs us 50 Rand. Because we don't want to be perceived as as being gold diggers, we're never going to make it more than, let's say, 2,000 Rand. So you can put those guardrails in so that it also never gets to zero. And also the AI machine learning will find that it'll lower the price to get more people buying. But if it finds that lowering the price doesn't get more buyers, it stops lowering the price because it's learning. Doesn't matter if I'm charging 100 Rand or 90 Rand, I'm not getting more buyers. It's not increasing demand. So let's put it back up to 100 Rand. So that's just some of the behind the scenes. It's a very clever system, basically.
So
if you look at a typical example, if you think about what must have been going on in the airlines, the remaining airlines after Kalula, liquidated. They suddenly probably saw a massive increase in demand, and if they'd let the machines go wild, they would have been accused of price gouging. So undoubtedly, they have had to constrain, the upper limits there for a period of time. I reckon that if there isn't increased capacity coming onto the market in a couple of months' time, they will then let the machines go full AI mode and try and get people to smooth, I don't know what the answer will be. I mean, or maybe they'll leave the constraints in. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes there, but undoubtedly when all that capacity was taken off the market and people were looking for flights, they didn't allow the machines to just suddenly charge 10,000 Rand for a one-way Cape Town to AAVEA.
Because the demand was up, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, I'm hogging the questions a bit here. I can see, Louise, you've got your hand up, unless it's just a high five. Louise I think it's the same Louise from Joburg City Parks and Zoos.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks very much. And thanks for the opportunity. So I do come from a attraction that is completely municipal owned. And we don't even have a ticketing system at the moment, okay? But what I was wanting to ask is, did you do any studies on entities where they actually have to, by law, publicize their fees upfront for a year? Because that's what municipalities has to do. So we have to say, these are our tariffs and they have to be publicized. And then secondly, most of our weekday visitors are schools, and how does that now cater for the schooling system? If one can say to schools, obviously we would like schools to come on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so that we can clean up the zoo for the weekend. So we have other motives as well. But in any case, we would like to kind of have that kind of incentive. So I don't know if you've done any studies you can share on those kind of things that we can maybe smarten up and think about how we can implement. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I hope I'm going to see you tomorrow at the Javet UP.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Okay, would be great.
I'll be there.
Oh, good. Would be great to see you. So, Louise, two things. Yes, again, because a lot of those ski cable cars are municipally owned, almost 80% are municipally owned in Switzerland, and they do have to pre-publish their prices. So they published a minimum and a maximum price. And then, of course, it was quite good because people could see, well, listen, gosh, if I don't buy ahead of time, I might pay 300 Swiss francs for a ticket. Whereas if I go online, I could get that same ticket for a third of the price. But again, it'll depend what each municipality, wants to offer. And secondly, certainly in terms of schools, I have seen, dynamic pricing or smart pricing is one end of a continuum. So you've got variable pricing on the one end, or you've got completely fixed pricing with no changes. Then you've got sort of variable pricing, pensioners, school children. Then you've got some people who do a winter rate and a summer rate, and then it goes all the way along this continuum until you get smart pricing. So certainly for schools, I know a few attractions, and I know, I think I can say this, that Two Oceans Aquarium has done this incredibly successfully in Cape Town, where they saw high demand for school visits in the third quarter of the year, when they're trying to get the kids out of the schools so that matrics and standard nines can write, well, you're showing my age here, so matrics can do their mock exams, etc. And very low demand in quarter 1 and 2. So they're offering different prices, different entry fees to schools at different times of the year in order to shift demand to times that you want it. And again, I mean, one doesn't have to offer everything on every day. And if it suits you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but you can get an even better rate because you've now got time to clean up the zoo for Thursday, Friday, then that's what it is.
I think, just to add to there's very little I can add to that, but the further, just in theory, the further in advance you're required to sort of predict or set your prices, the worse your revenue outcome will be. The more you can do it, so the more you can allow yourself to adapt. So a range, if you can get away with publishing a range, that would be a great outcome for you. And then allow yourself to float within that range based on supply and demand, as at that point in time, or as close to this current point in time as real time as possible, then that's going to give you the best outcome in terms of revenue.
I also know that municipalities are extremely short of money, and anything that's going to increase revenue, and like that's what we're saying, make these attractions more self-sustaining, would probably go down quite well. So yeah.
I just have to add one thing as an accountant about this revenue. So for those who do read the income statement, this will come naturally. But if we think about all our businesses, they're all got a fixed cost base. It costs us so much to open. And so a 30% increase in revenue isn't a 30% increase in profit. It could be the difference between profit and loss. And if you are making, let's say, a 10% of revenue as a profit. A lot of businesses would target 10% as a sustainable profit. Then increasing your revenue takes your profit, it flows straight to the bottom line, and it takes your profit from 10% to 40% of your current revenue. So what we're talking about has a massive impact on sustainability and the profitability of businesses going forward.
I think a really good point, Jonathan, actually. Really good
Because
point.
this doesn't affect, this is not adding cost to increase revenue. This is just flowing straight through to the bottom of the bottom line.
I think that's a huge point, yeah.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions. Sibusiso, I think you were first, or was it ladies first? Lehmann, I see your hand's also up.
Just waiting for you, Johnny, to say who speaks first.
You go for it. I was just testing the waters. You go for it.
Oh, awesome. Quite interesting presentation. Really loved it. I just want to say as a comment, things have really changed when it comes to municipal or government-owned products. We really need this kind of service. And I think we will be your main market. And I think I will try and arrange for a presentation from you guys or proposal to my head of department. And the main reason is because, why things have changed, Louisa, is because, our main objective as government entities was really to speak to service delivery. That has changed. I think COVID was a huge acceleration or cause for that change. So we now need to really understand better how we price and work on price strategies, work on ticketing systems. So I think I'm very interested. And I think this will be a great informer on how to kind of strategize our pricing, because right now, I'll give you a typical example. Some of my products, in fact, venues that I lease out to the public, it doesn't really make sense anymore. The municipalities and all government products really now need to think profitability than service delivery. We need to manage these facilities like, individual businesses. So it's really something that I think guys will need a further intense kind of presentations for our kind of facilities. And thanks. I think it was very interesting on my side.
Thanks, Sibusiso, and we need to thank you for putting together the AAVEA chapter meeting tomorrow and being such a star and getting so many people together. Sibusiso, he did that. So
yeah, well done, Sibusiso. A chapter champion.
Yep.
Lehmann, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the interesting presentation. I work for the Dzong Museums of South Africa, and I'm trying to think about how this would work, considering that we have DMCs and tour operators, and usually they would want to use the pricing ahead of time to prepare, or they would want fixed pricing. So I'm trying to think how this would work for them.
yeah. So there's two things. Lehmann, did I hear you correctly? You did Song Museums. That's up there by Cullen and north of Pretoria. Is that right?
There are 8 of them
Yes.
in
Yes,
the whole
but
of
it's up-
Pretoria and 1 in Johannesburg.
Yes. Okay, now I'm thinking I couldn't hear what you said, so I'm just was trying to think. So yes, look, a lot of attractions have said that. And there's 2 ways. First of all, the system can price, you can put the rules in. That's why the system is designed for each attraction specifically for their needs. So you can put the rules in as to what you need. So if you need tour operator pricing that remains static, that's of course possible. What I think you will find over time is that the system will let you provide static prices for the tour operator, but still say, look, Saturday, Sundays, it's 50 Rand an entrance, whereas Monday to Thursday, it's actually 30 Rand an entrance. And the AI over time will let you know which days you need to offer separately. So just as I go back to the ski areas, because they'll have a price Monday to Thursday and another price for the weekends and another price for school holidays. So even tour operators, they're used to paying booking for different days, and you can shift them onto the days that you want. But certainly in the system, you can extract tickets that you don't want to sell. And I would argue that ultimately, having run the AI smart pricing for a period of time, you will see at the true price point of your ticket. Because right now, every single attraction in South Africa, honestly, has guessed the price. They've based it on last year and the year before and the year before. We think we can get 10 Rand for an entrance fee. We think we can get 190 Rand for an entrance fee. And it's actually, the market's never actually been tested. Jonathan, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so I think in terms of tour operators, so firstly, how our system works is again, I'm going to use Stadium Sports as an example. That's the most complicated possible example, where you have multiple channels. You've got your season ticket channels, you've got tour operators around the world. So what we would do is we would feed, based on your rules, a different price to each channel. So your rules might look as follows. It might look fixed price to tour operators for a period of 3 months, allow the price to only go up online. The price at the door changes every day and can never be less than the online price. I'm just throwing like examples out there. But what it will then do is we'll see the demand coming in from the tour operators, and it'll as through the booking cycle for, let's say, a particular day, and then it will vary the price, the remaining prices accordingly. So you'll still get the best possible outcome. That, I don't know if I'm making sense there. And then the other thing I would just add is that tour operators like fixed prices, but we can always change that assumption, because they don't get fixed prices from airlines when they're doing package deals. And they don't necessarily get fixed prices from hotels either. That being said, there's nothing to stop us giving a fixed price to a tour operator. All it means is we won't be maximizing revenue through that particular channel.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks, Sabine. I think, Lehmann, thanks so much for that question. I think it's really important. And I think, again, I kind of felt like we've had the dynamic pricing discussion since 2017, 2018. We're all kind of nervous. But what I must say, thanks to Sabine and Jonathan for doing, is putting some South African accents to this sort of technology. I think we're all scared of getting the Europeans out here and trying to fix, South Africans need South African solutions. So again, encourage everybody to get in touch with them, find out, and let's see if we can, fill the aquarium on Mondays, not Saturdays. It'd be great. Sadly, we are out of time. We've done pretty well, actually. If you do have any questions, again, please get in touch with Sabine or Jonathan. Details are on the website. Our next live chat we want to do fairly soon, and we want to talk about cashless and card sort of environments. Really another important one that I think you guys will get a lot of value out of. But for now, thank you very much, Sabine. Thank you, Jonathan, and have a wonderful week.
Yeah, and for those in Gauteng, see you tomorrow at the Javits, please.
See you tomorrow.
Thanks all. Thanks all.
Awesome.
Very much. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Bye. Bye.